So it is 2 horses and 2 first-timers with 2 months to the presidential race 2022. The official presidential nominations concluded this week with a mix of surprises and the predictable. Like you all guessed, it is Ruto versus Raila in a race that will also have Wahiga Mwaure of Agano Party and Professor George Wajakoya, who is talking leaves in the Roots Party. Then there was the dramatic one-man street protest at the gates of Bomas of Kenya, a voters' card burning moment reminiscent of the pass laws protests of the African colonial era. Muthiora Kariara was lighting fires as Mwangi wa Iria threatened Samsonian ending to the election, while Jimmy Wanjigi rejected the cut. And after managing to cut down the list of presidential aspirants from 56 to only 4, the IEBC has a new problem that includes potentially close to 500,000 dead voters who are amongst those listed to vote on the 9th of August. And that is if the audit keeps everything constant. So, is the IEBC ready, and what is the state of that register? Kaikai's kicker thinks the IEBC must do more to look, if not feel, prepared for the elections. The memo is addressed to residents of that distant, lawless planet called Kenyan politics. The punchline reviews the performance of the 12th Parliament. Number 12 will shock you. And on my take, it is time we confronted the mindset problem amongst Kenyan drivers plying our killer roads. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the News Gang.
We will take a position as a party. We are writing to the IEBC. You have seen in the media that there was an attempt to obliterate names from the IEBC register. And so far, almost 800,000 names. 800?
Yeah.
About 1 million. About 1 million names have somehow disappeared from the register. It's in the public domain. And I think even the IEBC have said they are doing some remedial steps. Those kind of attempts are dangerous, especially when certain public officials are chest thumping that they have the so-called system and the deep state to manipulate the election.
Is the preliminary report by the audit found ready? If so, what are the preliminary findings? 2. When is the draft final report of audits of registered voters expected?
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the News Gang, and it's good to have you all here again this Thursday. Please do send us your feedback. The hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya. We look forward to your feedback today. So, listen, folks, things are happening at the IEBC, or perhaps not happening as, was anticipated. Francis, let me begin with you. Some major issues that have been raised. But I'd like to take us back to a story that we did here on Citizen Television. Was it about a week ago?
Yep.
And there were some issues that we raised there. And in several ways, it looks like we're vindicated in some of the concerns that were raised. Just, remind us all of that story and the issues therein.
Oh yes. Thanks, Yvonne. I remember that Monday, we bumped into a memo written on 25th of May 2022 by one Obadiah Keitani. It was addressed to county election managers and senior election officers, and the title was Reversal of Transfers. And if you allow me, I will just read paragraph 1 of the letter. The Commission has conducted some preliminary analysis of the register of voters and noted that there could be some transfer of voters which were effected without the supporting statutory forms. That was the first red flag, because, put it this way, Yvonne, if you registered as a voter at Karori Primary School or St. George's Primary School or Habasoini Primary School, and that's where you voted in 2017, and then When you're verifying, you find your voter registration details at Turkana or Kwale or Kilifi or Busia. It would surprise you.
Yeah.
Then the next question should be, how did this happen? One person, two people, 3, 10, maybe. But thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, then that is a question. And so when we pursued that story, of course, the first response was denial. And thereafter, a week later or 2 weeks later, our position has been vindicated by none other than the commission itself, that there were some irregular transfers. And I've always asked, because these transfers would not just happen, there must be a beneficiary. And the target should not be so much about the transfer, but so much about the trigger of the transfers and the would-be beneficiary. Because it means somebody didn't want you to vote where you voted in the last election, or for one reason or the other. And I would guess 2 reasons. One, because they don't want you to vote so that you depress the numbers, or they want to transfer you to another polling station so that that number can be voted for in one way or another, without necessarily apportioning blame, whether it was this side of the political divide or that side of the political divide that triggered it or did it. Suffice to say, this is something that IEBC ought to have noted, because it's a very serious issue. A voter register is the election. A credible voter register leads to a credible election.
And that's right. And right after we did that story, and then we heard from the Deputy President, who sounded the alarm in that meeting with representatives from the European Union. We played that at the start of the show. And then, and then I think, Raila Odinga said it, again, also raised those issues when it was being cleared. I just want to read this statement from the IEBC on the certification of the register with some of those numbers. So there's 246,465 dead voters, 7,100 with duplicate records, about 226,000 registered with IDs that don't validly belong to them, another 164,269 registered with invalid identification documents. So this is what they're getting out of it. Alina, Francis has said, look, a voter register is very key. It's a key component to a free, fair and verifiable election. And now we're having these statements. What does this say to you? 60 days to an election, perhaps there's still time to rectify it. But obviously, somewhat similar issues that we've seen before.
Absolutely. It all starts with the voters register. And the question right now that should be asked is, what are those dead people doing on the voters register? Because what we are seeing is also possibly an indication of what the country actually went through in 2017 and why the 2017 election, presidential election was nullified. It's about just the inability to actually account for every vote that is cast there and counted. And there is a culture that is emerging, which, if it's not arrested in this coming election, then actually this country will take a very, very long time to build trust in democratic elections. Because the Supreme Court case of 2017 proved to us that, look, the counting and the tallying of votes is a gray area in this country. There is an election regarded as the worst in history, and it was held in Liberia in 1927. In 1927, Liberia had 15,000 registered voters, and there was a presidential election. The winner got 240,000 votes, and the loser got 9,000 votes. Now, look at that.
Huge margin.
Huge margin. I mean, the number of registered voters versus the votes that are actually declared, it just says a statement. This thing of interfering with either the transmission or the tallying of results is a huge problem. And that is why you see people being very jittery about the state of the register. And I think Kenyans should welcome what they are hearing from the Deputy President and what they are hearing from Raila Odinga, what they've heard from Martha Karua, as a very, very good call that come on, clean up those books. It had better only contain legitimate voters who have been validly registered as voters. And then the next step is when they vote, please count their vote and announce only what went into the ballot box as a valid vote. So it's good vigilance that these parties are raising this. And we also saw today, and maybe we'll get into that, when they were conducting the simulation exercise. Again, you could tell that the political parties do not have that full trust that everything they are seeing there is good or is going to work the right way. So at this stage, the most important thing for Kenyans is vigilance among all parties. The pressure will be piled on IEBC to do the right thing, to ensure its books are in good stead, and to ensure that the exercise will be conducted in a credible way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the same thing that Linus and Gashuri and even talked about is that the importance of a definitive and verifiable voters register, because of the perception of the people, so that they have the belief that the IEBC can conduct free, fair, just elections. Yeah. And of course, you've mentioned the numbers there that were brought up yesterday by IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati about tashwishi zilizopo. So in total, it's 1.18 million, the numbers that you've said. And 9th of June was the date when the voter register should have been ready, 60 days too. And I think we need to listen to what the audit firm, KPMG, had to say about the voter register, and also Wafula Chebukati said about it, and then we can continue with this conversation.
A total of 246,465 deceased voters, 481,711 duplicate records. These are people sharing more than one ID. 226,143 voters registered with IDs that don't validly belong to them. 164,269 registered voters with voter records which have invalid documentation, IDs and passports. These are documents of identification which are not recognized as per the Kenyan records. And these issues must be addressed prior to certification and publication of the register. Previously, the Commission had announced that it would certify and publish the register of voters on or before 9th of June 2022, that's tomorrow. However, due to the implementation of these preliminary audit findings on the register, the Commission has decided to address the findings prior to certifying the register for publication on or before the 20th of June this year.
There are still quite a number of recommendations that we have provided in relation to the anomalies that is articulated that must be dealt with before a final register of voters can be gazetted and submitted to the public.
IEBC engaged KPMG on April 7th to do this audit of the voter register, because at the time we still had the continuous voter registration exercise going on. And one would ask, from one election to another, we have about slightly over 4 years, almost 5 years. And the IEBC should continuously be looking through the voter register to update it, so that you don't have to have issues like dead, deceased voters still in the register, or those who are duplicate documents, or those who are registered with IDs that do not validly belong to them. So that now we are 60 days to the elections, Yvonne, there are the more pending things that should be done now, including today. They should have said, well, the voter register is ready, because we had done our jobs. In the past 4 or so years, we've been looking through it and making sure that all these anomalies are rectified, because there's so much more the IEBC needs to do. Yeah. I heard the chairman speaking yesterday, and he said that they're still on course. that by 30th of June, they'll start preparing the ballot paper, that they're listening to cases that have been filed by those who, the 166 people who were aspirants who had complaints about the whole exercise. They are starting it on 10th of June. That is all well and good. But I think the IEBC has bigger issues to deal with than starting looking through a register all over again. KPMG should have come in when it did on April 7th, and by today tell us the voter register is ready and not have to deal with all these issues because of perception again, Yvonne. And Linus mentioned what happened in 2017, and I wanted to read something that was said here by the courts, by the Supreme Court back then. Because already we've had the current Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, talking about how whatever the court cited in 2017 when it nullified the results of the presidential election should not be something that the IEBC should be dealing with now. And it's also something that came up when we had the civil society talking about it also, that the issues that were raised that should have been dealt with, we should not have them now. Because I remember what the Supreme Court said about the IEBC, saying it committed irregularities in the transmission of results. And it said, and I quote, "If not, this court, whenever called upon to adjudicate on a similar dispute, will reach the same decision if the anomalies remain the same, irrespective of who the aspirants may be. Consistency and fidelity to the Constitution is a non-wavering commitment this court makes." This was in 2017 by the Supreme Court. And if some of the issues that were raised then have not been dealt with now, including issues to do with transmission of results, what are we going to have after the results are announced on 9th of August? Cases and grounds for those who may have felt aggrieved to go to court and say, well, look at the precedent that was set here in 2017, and the same issues may have come up again. So perception and the readiness of the IEBC are issues that are coming up now because of what we experienced in 2017, what we've experienced in previous elections that we don't want to experience again.
Yeah, and we've talked about the issue of the voter register and just how important that is. You know, it really is sort of the first line of defense you have there. And it's important for voters who went and took their time to register to vote, to have the opportunity to do that at the polling stations at which they chose to vote. And that is what the whole month-long exercise has been about, for voters to have a chance to say, okay, I hope I'm registered in the right place, check my details are correct. And if there was any change that they desired to make, that they had the opportunity to do so, so that on election day, they don't go and find, your records are elsewhere. And some of those stories we saw for people who, registered in Nairobi, but somehow find their names in Wajir or Garissa or, in a place that's quite honestly very far, and a change that they say they did not make on their own and willingly, because, the issue and the rights of voters are important, and that actually amounts to voter suppression if voters get to a point and they're not able to exercise their rights. So that's an important thing. But then something else also took place today, Gashuri, which was the simulation exercise. Again, what Jamila was talking about, which is the transmission of results. You remember this was a big issue. Discussed it on My Take last week, particularly with the issue of 3G network coverage of, all the polling stations and how they're going to be able to transmit it. If you recall, with the last Supreme Court, what did they say? That presiding officers were transmitting the results from polling stations other than, where the result was undesignated, because they were looking for network. And, here we are again, and there's been talk of a complementary mechanism. So, as Jamila was saying, the same issues, and those have now come up again with a simulation exercise.
Absolutely. And before I step there, there are two issues, by the way, we need to distinguish. There's the whole question of people whose registration details have been transferred to other polling stations without their knowledge.
Okay.
That's a separate number. We're also talking about a number of about 1.18 million, the numbers that Jamila has read out and the numbers that we have had the IEBC chairman talk about. These are people who are not supposed to be in the voter register. So the number could go higher. It is in excess of 1 million point something. And so much may be said about the number of deceased voters, because, I mean, people who are registered as voters will keep, resting in one way or another continuously. Yeah? One may argue the case of the deceased voters who are in the register because it's a continuous process. But I would focus myself on the 481,000 voter registration details.
Duplicate records?
Who have duplicate records. And particularly the 221,000 who were registered with identity cards that do not belong to them, and the 164,000 who were registered with invalid national identification documents. Look, who registered them is the first question. Why did they register them is the second question. Third, who is the beneficiary of such a registration? If we're able to answer those three fundamental questions, then we should be able to tell what is happening.
I think should add when as well.
And when they were registered.
Yeah.
But more importantly, voter registration in this country is an electronic process. I mean, we've seen how people are registered as voters. So it is very possible, actually very easy, to track back because there are entries, there are logs, and say, this and so on this day and this time was registered as a voter by this person.
Yep.
So that
on using this device. It's geolocated, so you would know exactly where. Yeah.
The same principle applies to those who are transferred because it is expected that you will fill a form and say, I want to move from polling station A to polling station B. There will be a form that you will fill. There are details that will be entered in that kit. And so it is very easy to tell who did this. I saw in that memo that punitive action was promised for people who facilitated that. Maybe once we are done with this, IEBC should also tell us these are the officers who facilitated this process of irregular, illegal registration of voters using invalid documents. And these are the consequences. These are the officers who registered or who transferred voters from one polling station to another without their knowledge, and these are the consequences. This is where the risk is, as Linas was pointing out. There are people who did not bother to verify their registration details, either because they didn't know or they didn't find it necessary. What happens? On the 9th of August, they will troop to polling stations that they voted in 2017, and they will not find their registration details. And so you would expect some pandemonium in some polling stations. And so these are some of the things that need to be guarded against because you don't want, first of all, to deny people a chance, an opportunity to exercise their constitutional right to vote for reasons unknown to them, for mistakes that they did not commit. Because your voter registration details should be safe. They should be safeguarded in such a way that...
And it should be the same.
Once you have voted in this polling station, you can rest assured that in the next election, whether it's a by-election or a referendum or a general election, that your voter registration details will be intact. So you will come back to the same polling station, find your details there, and be enabled, be facilitated to exercise your democratic right.
Especially if you didn't change your details in the last 5 years. It shouldn't have to be the onus is on, the registered voter to keep checking and informing the IEBC. You make a great point.
Unless I have requested, my registration details should be the same.
Right.
So that tells you that there must be some collusion of sorts within the commission and outside the commission. And this is the situation as I look at it. We're dealing with an election where, especially the two main contestants in this, have an idea of what happens, truth be told. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of these things are facilitated from that end.
Yeah, Jamila, it's the...
I just wanted to pick from where he's left it because he's getting on to something, and which is something that we should be, as a country, frank about. Out of the last 4 elections, only one can really pass the integrity and credibility test. And that is the 2002 election in which Mwai Kibaki of the National Rainbow Coalition defeated Uhuru Kenyatta of the Kenya African National Union, KANU, in an election that didn't have a lot of forces at play at the electoral management level. You see, KANU was a very powerful party, but you have to give it to the late President Daniel Arap Moi and that party. They didn't do this visible battle or interest in trying to determine the outcome of the 2002 election. Similarly, the opposition did its bit, which is to just guard the vote. And I remember one of the concerns they had was how long it was taking to announce the results at the City Hall here in Nairobi. And I remember what Raila Odinga and the other National Rainbow Coalition leaders did was to demand that the Electoral Commission Chairman, Samuel Kivutu, declares the results because the remaining constituencies were not sufficient to alter the outcome of the election. And so it was a good election. 2002 was a good election. What did we see in 2007? We started seeing external sort of management of the election. So there was the ECK, the Electoral Commission of Kenya, but there was also this state thing that will tell the media, you know, this is our country, we need to all love our country. Yes, we love our country, but we should also love credible electoral processes. And that was 2007, the launch of the arrival of other forces other than the electoral body in the management of election. When you look at 2013, similarly, and 2017, you'll see a lot of loud mouths that are not the IEBC. And this is a problem. It is a problem. It was a problem in 2013. It was a problem in 2017. And I think it is a problem in 2017 when we have people who are not part of the IEBC, but sort of speaking authoritatively about how the process will turn out. Because this always suggests interference, suggests other forces, suggests collusion and other things, which is why the current noise is really a welcome thing, because this could be the coming out, if we can give a different meaning to it, to that. Because, like Francis says, these politicians know. They have been players across the last 3 elections, and they know very well when this other mysterious hand started playing a role in the election process. For example, we're not going to hear a lot of admissions, but maybe somewhere down history, we will hear where the results were coming from in 2017. You heard of servers that could not be located. You heard of, the server is in France. Open it, or they're still sleeping. I mean, there's no way you could, for countries that are nearly in the same time zone. What are you talking about? There's been a lot of mischief in the last 3 elections. Mischief that is externally imposed, especially on the electoral management process, because forces other than the voter started coming in to try and determine the outcome of the election. And then, if we don't do it differently in 2022, then I think this will take hold, and that's why you'll see these battles about who should be in the IEBC, who should be the returning officer, because the considerations are no longer the regular integrity of an election official tallying votes and declaring the results. You now want someone who can actually interfere with what the voter has said. So I think it's a good start when you have the deputy president saying, hey, there are 1 million voters that have been irregularly transferred. You have the Azimio party leader, Raila Odinga, saying, hey, IEBC, you need to tell us how far you've gone with implementing the recommendations of the court of 2017. That's a good start. And I think it's the conversation that must be had and should go deep into the ears of the IEBC, so that nobody in IEBC should think of doing the election in the same way it was done in 2017, or indeed in the same way it was done in 2013.
Yeah, absolutely. Must get better. So we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll obviously talk about that simulation exercise that took place today. And I think just to reiterate, Linus, what you're saying about, the perception, everybody remembers in 2017 when one commissioner or another was said to be allied to one political wing or another, when the CEO was allied or alleged to have been working for who or whose interests. And that is something that this commission must shed.
More importantly, an election official died.
There you go.
The manager, the ICT manager, dies mysteriously.
Let's never forget.
And then electronic transmission of results becomes an issue.
So there's a huge perception problem that the IEBC needs to deal with, and deal with very fast, with 60 days to go. We come back, we'll talk about simulation and what that means. How long will it take for all the results to be transmitted to the National Tallying Center, including all the drama that surrounded the nomination of candidates, as Francis Gashuri once told us, not once, not twice actually, there would be premium tiers, and there were premium tiers, quite literally. We'll be back.